On this week's Full-Time Roundup, the title races tighten up, Daniel gets the better of Matt in the battle of the day, and predictions cap us off heading into a big week. Full-Time Roundup starts right now. And welcome into the latest episode of the Full-Time Roundup. Matt Gesslin here, joined as always by Daniel Brackett. Daniel, congratulations. We'll get to it later. I have to give credit where credit is due, but again, we don't want to spend too much time right now as there's a lot to cover. But of course, I am referring to the EFL Carabao Cup game this afternoon in which Daniel and the Liverpool boys took care of business. It's a little painful. I sat in front of my television for quite a few minutes afterwards, but again, we'll get to that later. Daniel, how are you doing on a Sunday? A big Sunday here in the Queen City after a notorious victory for Charlotte FC, their first ever home opener victory last night. I know you were there. I was there as well. How are you feeling today, given you had a pretty crazy, not even 24 hours, let's call it 12 to 18 hours?
Yeah, the voice is a little sore today, I'm not going to lie. It was also very chilly, so there is a chance that I do catch a cold after last night. But soccer-wise, it was fairly fantastic. Both my teams won in their respective days. Had a good time doing it. Met up with some good friends before the Charlotte FC game, and it felt like the boys are back in town in a way when Charlotte FC kicks off. So excited to, go to a lot of MLS games and have that league kind of start up.
I'm sure you were one of those guys that was either wearing a T-shirt or no jacket. So
I had the sweatshirt, and it was not enough. It was not enough.
The sweatshirt was definitely not enough. I had some gloves. I had some leggings on as I was sidelined, but it was pretty cold out there for sure. But jumping right in, Daniel, and of course we will cover MLS continually throughout our episodes here as this league does kick off, similar to some other leagues across the world. We've done periodically like Liga MX, but want to go back over to Europe quickly, Daniel, as of course, Liverpool did not participate this weekend, but they participated on Wednesday in their Tuesday, in their game for the week. But we have a pretty intriguing title race here in the Premier League. Not that we didn't have one before this weekend, but all three teams continue to win. Of course, Manchester City played their makeup game against Brentford on Tuesday, which they took care of business there as well. And we're looking at three teams that are separated by 1 point, 2 points, from top to third to first. Arsenal in second place, second or third with 58 points. Liverpool first with 60, and Man City in second with 59. Now, out of the two games, Daniel, which one was a little bit more, I wouldn't say concerning, but just kind of which one stood out to you more? Was it the City game against Bournemouth, or was it the Arsenal game against Newcastle, which really kind of felt pretty straightforward for Arsenal in the end?
Man, that's a loaded question, but I'd say Manchester City was it wasn't the most interesting watch, but it was interesting to see how they continue to grind out these wins. They, again, were not convincing very much. I think they're going through a little bit of a blip, and we're calling it a blip, but they literally drawn in one narrowly twice in a row. So it's per their standard, it's a blip. But in reality, they're just kind of churning out W's as they go.
Totally different approach than Arsenal and Liverpool, who continue to steamroll teams. Of course, Arsenal winning 4-1 against Newcastle. It was 4-0, really, pretty much done and dusted. A nice little consolation goal at the end there for Newcastle. I want to ask you, though, of course, as we gear and focus on the title race real quick, what has happened to Newcastle, and where do we sit on Eddie Howe? No pun intended on whether he's in a hot seat or not, but we've been talking about how we felt he was okay for a little bit of time now, given all the injuries this year, but things appear to be changing. Is he in jeopardy at this point, or is this kind of just what you expect given, everything that happened for Newcastle so far this campaign?
It's hard to predict owners that are fairly new. So it's going to be a good trial test to see how much their patience goes for. And they're missing Tonali. They're missing a ton of players. So the injuries have been there probably since like week 7 of the Premier League, but they absolutely got battered by Arsenal. It wasn't even close. So they do have an FA Cup round this Wednesday. So I would imagine if they crash out of that as well, that could spell trouble for Eddie Howe. But I think they're going to keep relying on Eddie Howe for the time being, not make any irrational decisions, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, it's a weird schedule. Of course, they've won, a couple games. They beat Fulham, Aston Villa, drew in a wild 4-4 game against Luton, which we talked about on our episode when that happened. So it's not like they've been playing completely out of whack. They've obviously gotten some results and still, top half of the table, which I guess to your point, with all the injuries that they've had and everything that they've gone through, and first year in championship in European football in a very long time, of course, play that into all of the, management of the roster and who's going to play, whatnot. I still think Newcastle are a decent position. To your point, though, whether or not Eddie Howe makes it, I don't know. But moving back to the title race, Daniel, of course, Liverpool played today. You saw, the big three that we thought or might have been potentially playing were not in the squad. You also saw Luis Diaz, if you were watching closely, pull up at the end there with an apparent groin injury, although he didn't seem like he had an option to come off, given I think you had made all 5 subs and then the extra sub in extra time. Is that a concern at this point? Of course, it didn't sound like, even if they were optional or close to being able to play, Mo Salah, Szoboszlai, or Nunez were gonna go today. So that means that their injuries are clearly more than what's on the table. Of course, Trent Alexander-Arnold was in a boot, if you saw at the end of that game too, and we've seen Jota and his injury. How concerned are you about just who is possibly left to keep pace with this Manchester City team that, to your point, even though they don't look like they're steamrolling or playing as well as Liverpool or Arsenal, they're still keeping that pressure on you guys week in, week out. And it's only a matter of time before they get clicking again.
I'm extremely concerned. It seems like when it rains, it pours with injuries at the time, and it's happening right as I watch. I mean, Nunez was out. Him and Salah, I think, are back in training, so they're very close to being back. Now, if they feature Wednesday is the question. I think they'll be ready by next weekend. But if we lose Diaz, we probably lost Gravenberch due to that nasty challenge, which we'll cover later. I mean, we're going to have to be starting multiple academy kids at this rate. We're already starting Gerald Kwanzaa and Connor Bradley almost every single game at this point, but we're going to have to rely on a Bobby Clark or a McConnell or a Das, I think is his name, who played up top today. Because we had 13 senior players in the squad today, and we probably just dropped to 11. So it's continuing to be just a nightmare, and I don't really understand it. I feel bad for Jurgen. I mean, we won today, thankfully, but this is not how I want the retirement tour or goodbye farewell tour to end for Jurgen. So I'm really hoping that we can have a couple, players make some comebacks within the next, say, 5 days, so we can continue to challenge and set the pace for City to catch us.
Yeah, of course. One bright spot, Daniel, of course, is that you don't have too many Premier League games between now and the big one on the 10th of March when you play City at home as well. So that's another positive here. But you have Southampton on Wednesday in the FA Cup. Then you have Nottingham Forest in the league, which, again, you don't ever want to take away any opponent in the Premier League. You never know what can happen, but feels like a relatively straightforward match there. And then, Sparta Prague in Europa. So again, you have a little bit of leeway now with Liverpool now officially on quadruple watch after winning the first one today. The question about, Europa, how do you approach that? It's 2 legs. Of course, you might want to take a little pass at the first leg, play a second side or even a C side if needed. And then again, March 10th is the big one against Manchester City. Where do you feel you need to be going into that of the form that you have against you? Is it 2 out of 3? Is it 2 wins and a draw? Kind of what's ideal for you going into that Manchester City match?
I don't think it has anything to do with form. It has to deal with who's going to be available. I mean, at the end of the day, the mentality and the culture that Klopp has set, it really doesn't matter how our form is. We're always going to get up for City no matter what. So it's just more of who we can get back healthy by that time. And I think we should have at least 3 or 4 senior players come back to the squad by then. And that's with fingers crossed, obviously. But and hopefully we pray that there's no more injuries as the fixtures go on. But I wanted to pivot towards Arsenal really quickly. I feel like a lot of people projected Arsenal to win because they were coming off a loss, but they won in a big way. And probably who led that big win was Kai Havertz at the 9, false 9, if you will, goal and assists. I feel like he's gotten on the score sheet as of late, and he's finally starting to somewhat live up to that expensive price tag. And he could be a key cog in Arteta's side to get rolling and get hot here, to not only rebound in the Champions League, but also challenge Liverpool and City in the Premier League title.
Yeah, he's been an interesting figure, especially the way that Arteta's used him throughout the year. Of course, playing him a little bit deeper at some point, and when he went back to the German national team, Nagelsmann playing him essentially at left back. So he's been kind of used in a different way across the spectrum this season, but he is starting to find some form. You saw it a couple games though now, Daniel, where he's been kind of finding those positions, not necessarily finishing, but you saw similar to how Erling Haaland kept finding ways to get chances, even though he didn't finish. And more recently, he's been putting them in, although he's obviously didn't play very well against Chelsea, but got a goal against Brentford later in the week. And so to your point, I mean, it's a new system for him, the way he's come in. And of course, Arteta has a lot of talent at his disposal. I think he's playing a little bit more in that role that he likes as a number 10, not necessarily, true number 9 up front. He comes a little bit deeper. So that'll be interesting to see if he can continue that momentum. But yeah, he's a big piece. They have a tough set of fixtures coming up before their battle with Manchester City. With Arsenal playing Sheffield, Brentford, and Chelsea in the league. Mix that in with a Champions League second leg against Porto at home. So they're in a tough spot, and they're going to need everyone right now to keep rolling. If they're going to continue to get through this month of March unscathed and really set themselves up in April for a nice run at the title. It could be one of those things though, Daniel, by the end of the month, they play City the last day of the month, that Arsenal could play themselves out of a title race given just what they can do here in the next couple of weeks. But Kai Havertz, along with, Martin Odegaard and Declan Rice and a lot of the other pieces that they have there are going to really need to step up. And it's good to see a player, who is a young player, talented player. Of course, it just didn't work out at Chelsea, but you never root poorly or badly for anyone. And you're happy to see him get some good form in at Arsenal at the moment.
Yeah, in this day of age of football, people kind of forget how young these talented players are. And so I don't know exactly off the top of my head how old he is. I would imagine around 24, 25. So he's not even halfway through his career probably. So it's always interesting to have perspective there. But I wanted to touch on the fight for European football as well in the Premier League. So we have Aston Villa, who crushed Forest. They're now 6 points back from Arsenal and 5 points ahead of Spurs, with who have one game in hand here. So, Aston Villa, who we've kind of asked ourselves, are they going to be able to kind of keep this form up throughout the Premier League season? I feel like the answer is yes.
It does feel that way. I mean, it's a tough one, right? Because you're looking at probably them going against Tottenham, if we're really honest. Obviously I know
Manchester United, I guess.
I wouldn't even. Again, you can't lose to Fulham. We'll get to that game in a second because I know you want to touch on Villa first. I mean, Ollie Watkins looked fantastic. Again, we've touched on it, and just the journey that he's been on and how he's playing right now. They're very difficult to play at home. Of course, they went on a little spell there where they lost 3 in a row at Villa Park, but that happens, especially one of them not being in the league. But I think Unai Emery, he's shown that he can play stingy style of ball if he needs to. He can also play expansive soccer. The talent is not there. Long term speaking, I think this is a very capped roster as far as ceiling and where they can go, right? Ollie Watkins is probably not going to go to a big four club at this point. I think where he is right now is probably the max for Ollie Watkins. That doesn't exclude him from getting into the England squad, but he's not going to go to, a Liverpool or Manchester City at this stage of his career. So again, Unai Emery, that doesn't mean that you can't be in the top four. And you're seeing that right now with a good manager who has a system and a style he wants to play, and his players are buying in. And yes, it's a long season. You're going to have little moments like they have, but they've bounced back, and they sit in I would say pole position, 5 points clear of Tottenham for that fourth spot. And really, like I said, with Manchester United, not knowing what you're going to get from them, you're really looking at just Tottenham, and we know what Tottenham can and cannot do over the years. And just to put in perspective, they play Luton next, then they play Spurs. So that's a big game to separate that. If they win that game, I'll almost guarantee fourth place for them in the rest of the season. And then you
guarantee the Matt Gaskin,
and you go West Ham and Wolves after that. So this month of March is a really big stepping stone and marker for them to secure that spot in the top four.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. The only thing is, yes, you say they achieved the top four status. All right. The next question you ask after the season is, can we maintain that top four status? And it seems like the squad is going to get picked away at key positions as well. Douglas Luiz scored a brace this weekend. He probably will not be on this roster come August of next year. I think Watkins maybe could find himself a move, but why would you if you're in Champions League ball? That wouldn't really make sense. They did tie down Leon Bailey as well to a long-term contract. I don't think Diaby will be going anywhere soon, but I mean, they could still leave or lose some players at key positions. So we'll see if they can, Emery can convince people to stay and not be a selling club, and then continue to recruit on top of that, and maintain that UCL Europa League status year in and year out. Now, you mentioned Spurs. They did not play this week. I'm not really sure why. I don't
they played us. They were supposed to play us, and so
it got postponed. You're right. Yep. You're right. Okay, that makes sense. So they do have that game in hand now, so they can catch up to Aston Villa. Whenever this Chelsea match is rescheduled. But then we have Man U on the other hand, and I think it was last episode or the episode before, we were kind of talking about, all right, well, Man U's gained some steam here. They're looking like they could, catch up to Spurs at least, and if not them, maybe Villa if they decide to slip. And you know what they do? They go and shoot themselves in the foot on Saturday. And it's not completely their fault. Rasmus Højlund was a huge miss for them. Lissandro Martinez currently is out. Luke Shaw. I mean, they do have an injury-riddled squad, but you can't make excuses because at this point of the season, every single team has major injuries. Like I can't think of a team who doesn't or does not have injuries. So they just look like they had nothing going forward the entire game. I thought Fulham outplayed them the entire time, and it's a huge setback when talking top four, top five football.
Yeah, you can't win. You can't lose 8 games at home. I was gonna say win and got
can't win.
My brain was thinking about 2 things at once there. You cannot lose 8 games at home and expect to kind of be in that top 4 race. It is surprising. Now, of course, not all 8 games are in the Premier League, so just keep that in mind. But they have lost. They're not playing well at home. And you mentioned, Rasmus Højlund out. That's a big piece. The guy has scored 8 goals in 8 games for them. Really, with him out, it changes so much, not only because he's not going to be there to put the ball in the net, but now you have to play arguably Marcus Rashford out of position if that's what Erik ten Hag chooses to do. And Rashford is much more effective on the left-hand side cutting in. And then you have Garnacho on the right-hand side with Højlund up top. That with the way that they were set up that way, they looked, and that's where we were talking about that they started to look a little bit more electric, if you will, to use a different word. But with Højlund out, and it looks like he's going to be out for 2 or 3 weeks. So that's very concerning. Who's going to kind of fill in on that left-hand side? And when you put Rashford up top, or do you find a new player to put up top? So if you're Eric Ten Hag, yes, you've been dealing with injuries all season, but the pressure is still on. It's Manchester United. They were turning the corner, you felt like, yet even though it wasn't really consistently good performances, they got results, and you're starting to see that now come to fruition, where there really isn't much of a system yet still in place, that if you lose a piece like Hoyland, it just is a insert and continue. So that's a concern for me if I'm a Manchester United fan.
And that's compounded for one singular reason. And we've discussed this before. It's bad recruitment. When Razzie H got hurt, I was thinking in my head, okay, so who's going to start in his place? Probably, like you said, slide Rashford up top. All right, who's going to play on the wing? I was guessing it was going to be Anthony. It was not Anthony. It was not Amad Diallo. It was an academy kid. You also are paying Jadon Sancho, $200 a week to not even play for your club at this point. And so it's ridiculous that, you sign Anthony for 90 million, you sign Sancho for however 90 million as well, or something around that. And you signed Amad Diallo a while ago and you don't really even give him a chance. And then you just give an academy kid to start. That's just a real indictment at where United are right now and what has hampered them in the past. And compared to other teams, you can just plug and play, and there's always someone chomping at the bit. And it feels like these big transfers that they keep doing every single year are not panning out. And Anthony is one of Ten Hag's guys. That's the crazy thing about it. He was the one pounding the table for Anthony, and he doesn't go on until I think it was like the 85th minute in this game when they need a goal desperately. It's just, a sad thing to see at this rate, but you got to fix the recruitment and, the squad before you can go on and get fifth place, get fourth place, get third place, and actually challenge for a Premier League title.
Yeah, of course, Casemiro does get hurt with a head injury early on too. That kind of takes away some of the midfield presence there. And yeah, I know you watched this game and had a little bit more of a closer eye on it. I think to your point though, the way that Eric Ten Hag personally went and got Anthony as his guy and doesn't play him now. He heard him talk after the game. It's a process. You can't look at this as one game, even though yes, we understand it's blah blah blah. But there's a new guy at the charge who's going to be looking at it and saying, "Are you still my guy to do this?" And he's got a lot of money, and he's willing to make some changes if he needs to. So you do wonder if Eric Ten Hag is really playing for his job the rest of the way here, Daniel. Maybe it doesn't come out right away, but if Manchester United doesn't show, a turnaround consistently and fight, if they're now stuck in sixth position the rest of the way, or even, battling with Tottenham for fifth, I don't know if Jim Ratcliffe is going to be too thrilled with what he's looking at long-term with Eric Ten Hag. So it'll be interesting to see. And another one that we want to touch on, and you mentioned, going the wrong way with United is of course Burnley, and these two storylines match right up. Vincent Kompany, is he going to be on the hot seat at the end of the season with Burnley, as well as the bad form? Now they're both on 13 points, bottom of the table in the Premier League. And
Sheffield, that is.
Excuse me, Sheffield, yes. And so rough times at Turf Moor. What are we feeling on Burnley here, and what's the future look like for Vincent Kompany?
This was the plan. Well, not the plan, but the plan is to rock with your manager for, be a yo-yo club, go down, come back up. They were still technically, as of now, they're the best championship side to ever come up. So, he has the skill and the know-it-all to do it again. So I'm probably going to stick with him and use this as a learning curve. But you'd like to see him adapt and try something different and rip up his game plan and maybe be a little bit more pragmatic. I used that word a lot several months ago when we first started this and talking about Vincent Kompany. So, the squad is also fairly devoid of talent. So it's hard to be that harsh on him. But you don't want to be competing with Sheffield United in any stretch of the imagination. They're supposed to be, the worst team by a mile. Probably after 6 weeks, we kind of decided that. So they need to pick up points somewhere. I don't know where they're going to do it. They either, lose a game late or they just get a stupid red card. So they kind of beat themselves a lot of the time. So it's going to be interesting to see if, can they end this horrific season on a good note somewhere? And I'd love for them to, put a couple wins together at the end, even though it doesn't matter. But I think they're going to keep the faith with Vincent and just try to, use this as much as a learning opportunity. Now, on the other side, there is two teams that are fighting each other not to get relegated, and that's Luton and Everton. And Luton played Liverpool, I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, and lost. And then Everton had a good lead at Brighton and threw it away to get a draw, but still has put them, in the meantime, 1 point ahead of Luton out of the relegation zone. This is probably the one or the two teams I'll be watching quite a bit of to see who's going to beat who to save relegation. We've seen Everton do it multiple years. Luton working, their magic. Who's going to do it?
Yeah, of course. You don't really expect much against Brighton if you're Everton. I think a point for them in this game is good. Just to be honest, that's who they're not competing against Brighton. 10 men Brighton as well. As they went down with a red card early. So there was an opportunity here to pick up all 3 points. But again, I think if you're Everton, you're happy with a point going to the MX, a tough team, a tough place to play. And you pick up a point that, again, you probably were not expected to get. You have a really tough schedule here: West Ham, Manchester United, Liverpool. So if you get out of that run there with 4 points, maybe you pick up a win against West Ham, a draw against United, a draw against Everton, Liverpool in a derby. That's a good run for you before you go into Bournemouth, Newcastle, and Burnley. So for me, Daniel, they're looking at picking up wins against the likes of Burnley, a Brentford, maybe a Forest, a Sheffield, and then they have a big matchup later in the season against Luton directly in the beginning of May. So again, you're trying to pick up a point here and there against some of these higher squads, and talk about a depleted roster of talent. That's what Sean Dyche is dealing with continually. I am worried about Everton. Of course, there is still the caveat that we don't know about their point deduction will get reduced. How many does it get reduced by? So I think from a league's perspective, from a race perspective, from a Luton perspective, you want this to be solved as soon as possible, so what your benchmark is. And if it's not Everton, it becomes next man up, which is probably Nottingham Forest or Crystal Palace. So you really want to know kind of where you're going, but it's going to be a tough race in that 17th to 15th position, or 18 to 15. So it's going to be an interesting battle from here out to the rest of the way.
Now, we talk about interesting battles here. As we pivot to the Bundesliga, is the title race back on as Bayern Munich get a massive W against Leipzig this weekend? I was personally really hoping they wouldn't and lose or draw 4 straight, but they're able to get it done at home. Harry Kane with a brace puts his hero cape on, and they are 8 points back from Bayer Leverkusen, but maybe this big win against Leipzig will spur them on to go and start challenging, and maybe their form will pick up, and then we'll have to see kind of how they handle the Champions League draw as well against Lazio.
Yeah, I guess my question, I'll put it back on you, is where does Bayer Leverkusen slip up? That's really, when you're 8 points behind, yes, Bayern Munich have to continue to win, and you expect them to win a majority of their games, just given the talent discrepancy that they have against most of the league in the Bundesliga. Is Bayer Leverkusen going to give them a gift, right? That's really what it boils down to. And where does that happen? And we saw again today, Dortmund fall to Hoffenheim, which
Hoffenheim.
Couldn't believe it. Again, more inconsistency from that team. Leipzig loses to Bayern Munich, so you don't really count them as much of a challenge. And we saw what Bayer Leverkusen did to them before already this season. So where does Bayer Leverkusen get that challenge from? Stuttgart dropping points as well against Mainz, bottom half or in the relegation battle. So, like is always the case for Bayern, these other teams in the league seem to be giving Bayer Leverkusen that cushion that they may need. And so to me, it's more a matter of, can Bayern put enough pressure on Leverkusen, whether that's, in the media or getting a couple points, that you didn't really expect them to get, although you expect Bayern Munich to win every game. So that to me really determines if this battle is on or not. And Champions League aside, I think they would do themselves a service if they get knocked out. Now, that's not the Bayern way. That's not what Bayern Munich expects. They expect to at least make it to the next round, and they probably will against Napoli or Lazio, excuse me. But that's the only way you're going to catch Leverkusen when you gave them a cushion of 8 points. It's not as small a cushion as it was last year with Dortmund.
Yeah, I went ahead and did the liberty of taking a look at the schedule here. So Leverkusen play Wolfsburg March 10th, maybe. That's like a time they slip up. They also have to play – they play a little bit of gauntlet at the end of the season, though. I'll give them that. They play Dortmund, Stuttgart, and then Frankfurt back-to-back-to-back. So there is a little gauntlet there. But we're talking about a team who has not lost.
Exactly. They have 33 games without a loss this season.
Zero sample size of losing. Zero. So I just don't think they do. But, at the end of the season, if they go and progress on to the Europa League, have a couple unlucky injuries, we'll probably set our eyes to that gauntlet 3 games at the end of the season. But that's also entailing that Bayern keep up all the way and don't drop more points, which is just as likely as Bayer Leverkusen, keeps winning.
And keep in mind, Leverkusen are doing this without Boniface and Palacios. No one's been talking about that of late either, too. So, two big pieces from their roster could come back. You mentioned anything can happen. Florian Wirtz could pick up a knock or something like that, and that changes the entire race.
The atmosphere.
Of course not. But I'm saying you never know what could happen. You saw Granit Xhaka fake an injury in his celebration. Why even tempt fate there if that's me with him? That's neither here nor there. But yeah, again, it comes down to if Bayern. Now, here's another question for you that might play into this: is if Xabi Alonso has to make a decision, with his managerial career in the future. There's a lot of rumors, a lot of stuff coming around and floating about going to Liverpool, and the pressure in the media about Bayern Munich already, and him having to squash those rumors and saying I'm focused on the one game at a time and Bayer Leverkusen. Yes, right thing to say in the news, in the media. But in that locker room, it's going to, when things get tighter and tighter, Daniel, is when it's going to become really interesting for Bayer Leverkusen. Right now, I think they're coasting as they should be with 8-point lead. Again, they're not coasting because they're still winning. They haven't won the Bundesliga in a very long time. They've been notoriously known for losing it and letting it slip. Bayern Munich are on their 11th season in a row. So there's pressure regardless right now. But imagine if we're in April, middle of April, closer to the end of the season, they're only 5 points clear, and all these rumblings are coming out about the manager leaving and, all that jazz. So we said this before, it's a long way to go, but they currently would have to have a very, very big catastrophic fall to lose this title, in my opinion, but it's still possible. And in Germany, teams like to give the title to Bayern Munich, it feels like.
Yeah, started with a question, ended with a statement. That's awesome. But yeah, no, I just how I've seen Xabi's man management, I just don't see that slip up or that locker room toxicity kind of creep in. So I just don't think that'll be a thing, hopefully. But can I go into the rest of the best? Stuttgart, like you mentioned, dropped points against Cologne. Dortmund, are they just going to stick? Are they just going to stick with Terzic? Like, are they just going to stick with him to the end of the season? Like, is there going to get to I mean, they're still in the knockout with the Champions League, but their Bundesliga form's atrocious. They play down to every opponent they have. I was with a Dortmund fan all weekend, and he just kept saying how he can't wait to watch us draw tomorrow. It was actually worse than that. They lost to Hoffenheim, so that was kind of funny. But yeah, it's just getting to the point now where I'm tired of it, and I really just enjoy focusing on the race between Bayer Leverkusen and Bayern, since no other Bundesliga team wants to step up in a big way. Real quick, Frankfurt also they draw with Wolfsburg to remain in the Europa Conference League spot, 6 points behind of Leipzig in 5th. So that's a really interesting one to see if they can kind of sneak their way into where Leipzig and Dortmund are, especially if Dortmund, continue that bad form of theirs. But for me, it seems like the Bundesliga is a little bit wrapped up at this point, pending anything crazy happening. And speaking of, wrapping it up, Real Madrid seemed to have wrapped up La Liga this week with a narrow win against Sevilla. But they were able to kind of pull away from Barcelona and Girona with Luka Modric, father time. He said no and scores an absolute banger to give them the lead. What do you think of that game?
Luka Modric is a timeless gem.
Just offside, continues. But
yes, probably offside. But and not him, of course. Antonio Rudiger was offside. If you watch the highlight, saves them. Honestly, I mean, they dominated this game as far as possession, but it didn't look like they really had a chance to. That was going to open the match up. They were not really free flowing. They had their opportunities, but it was second chances. They weren't great. They weren't grade A chances. They weren't playing touch football around Sevilla, and they made it they made it more challenging than they needed to be honest. But Modric came and saved the day. Now I don't agree with you necessarily that the race is over. I do think that the way that we've seen Real Madrid play, if they continue to play like this, they're going to drop points. Modric really did come and save the day today. Of course, Jude Bellingham is still hurt. The back line is basically decimated with injuries. Vinny Jr. was not his best form today. He played well. I don't think he played poorly, but he wasn't his best. And so if they continue to play like this, they could drop points. And Barcelona have been finding a little bit of form. They're only,
it's 8 points.
8 points, but
it's kind of a lot, though.
I know, but they have a game against each other. So there is another El Clasico.
6-pointer there, yeah.
So again, there is if now Barcelona has to play flawless. Like there's no doubt about that. They cannot drop points to Las Palmas or an Alaves again. Like and they may not play each other. I didn't look exactly at their fixtures, but those types of teams, they cannot lose points to like they have been throughout the course of the year. If they do not lose points though, Daniel, and they have a chance in that El Clasico to really tighten it and get it down to 2-3 points, then it's game on. So I don't think this is over. I do think a team like Girona will find out how they do tomorrow against Rayo Vallecano, if they can stay within touching distance. If they lose tomorrow, they're probably slipping out of the top 4 for me, honestly. But that's a different story. We'll cover that on Thursday after they play tomorrow. But I don't think this is quite over yet. And it's close, but there's still something here to play for.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, it's definitely not wrapped up for the most part. But I mean, I did look at Barca's future schedule, and it doesn't look great. They still have a ton of good teams. We're also, inherently putting stock in Barcelona to play consistent, which they haven't done all season. So that doesn't make me feel very warm and fuzzy. Now, you said Girona slipping out of the top 4. We haven't covered this yet, but Atletico Madrid played the worst team in La Liga yesterday, and they drew. And that's what you cannot do if you want to leapfrog Girona into the top 3 for Champions League spots. Luca Romero was the man of the match. AC Milan, Lone Army, continues to light there. He had 2 absolute wonder goals. If you didn't get a chance to see him, I mean, what a 19-year-old Argentinian kid. He's really starting to put it back together after he kind of got famous when he was at Mallorca a few years back. But this is just not good for Atletico. They're now 4 points with a game in hand, or 4 points back with Girona, who have a game in hand, who played, like you said, tomorrow. And then they're only 3 in the Athletic Club are only 3 points behind them. So it's just really a matter of who's going to just step up and catch form in the last month and a half of the season. And I'm just not really backing Atletico Madrid to do that really either.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, though, Atletico Madrid have Copa del Rey, then they'll have Champions League. Their fixture list has been, if you look at it, I think they played 4 games in 10 days
Yeah,
recently. Like they've been playing every other day for the last 2 or 3 weeks, it feels like. So
for
I
sure.
don't doubt you. And I don't disagree with what you're saying. I do think once they get through some of these hurdles of these back-to-backs that they have, of course, if they advance in Copa del Rey, they still have a few more games, and the inter game against in the Champions League will be interesting. But my point is, I think more broadly at Girona, I think if a 4-point gap between Atleti and Girona at this point in time, between now and the rest of the season, advantage Atleti, in my
That's
opinion.
fair.
And again, it all depends on tomorrow. If Girona can right the ship, they won last week. If they can continue to get back on track, I think it's a little bit more of an uphill battle to catch them or see them fall out of the top five. But we kind of expected them after the Madrid loss to kind of just. I did expect them to crater, and I still think that they slip a little bit along the way. They still have to play Atletico Madrid at some point, and so they have a tough. They still have a tough
And
couple of
Barca.
tough games and Barca. So I don't want the story to end, but if we're looking at it realistically of where Girona historically has been, they're not a top five side.
Yeah,
And so I think if you're looking at that perspective, I think, and especially with Athletic Club, although they had a big chance to close that gap and they got trounced yesterday. So I think if those two teams close that gap on Girona, they get leapfrog pretty easily, and all of a sudden you look and you blink and you're in 5th or 6th place. So that's where I'm coming from in that perspective. Not so much that Atleti are going to just blow them away, but I think it's a combination of both factors.
no doubt, no doubt. You did mention Champions League and Copa del Rey is coming up this week, so if they kind of crash out of those cup competitions, then they'll have all eyes on La Liga. That's when you could see them make a run. So I do see your point. Now I do want to cover the games that were played as well. Barca, you mentioned Barca are kind of back right now. A 4-0 win against Getafe. Rafinha, who's been out injured for a while, looked back to his best with a goal and an assist. They're now in second place. Of course, waiting for Girona to play tomorrow. So that's probably their best win they've had in a month and a half now. So we'll see if they take that performance, bottle it up, and try to replicate it, in Champions League or in La Liga in the next round of games. And then you also mentioned Athletic Club they do get trounced by Betis, and our boy Johnny Cardoso scored an absolute banger to open his account there. So I'm very impressed with how Betis played. They're also playing a ton of games right now, so I didn't really know how that game would go. But I was a little surprised that Betis got the best of Athletic Club.
Yeah, I mean they're both pretty comparable sides. That's why I think I had Betis 4th. You had Athletic Club 4th at the beginning of the season when we did our predictions. So again, they're right there, and they have been the last couple of seasons fighting for that fifth and 6th place position, or 4th place position. That if they one of them interchanging in there. So it wasn't surprising. The result was surprising. But again, I think that's also what some of those games can get that way when one team gets a little bit of a heads up and you're playing on the front foot to try and get an equalizer, and that third just comes, on a counter or against the run of play, if you will. So that didn't surprise me. I think it was, Betis are a good side. They have players like Isco and a few other guys out there with Miguel Pellegrini is the manager. So, he knows what he's doing. But it was an opportunity for Athletic Club Bilbao. There we go.
Twister.
Yeah, them and Atletico Madrid. They always get me. I thought it was an opportunity for them to move up the table and separate themselves even further. Now I don't think Betis can catch them. Just too far away. But this was a big game. 5 points is now again somewhere up top, not out of the question. And just to put a finer point on your Barcelona, conversation, they look good, but there's still some gaps and some issues there. The way that they played, and they were playing Getafe, so take that for what it's worth. But you take a clean sheet if you're Ter Stegen, first one since he's been back, which is nice. Rafinha looked good. They looked like they were playing with fun in their feet for once, kind of playing off each other. João Felix didn't look great, came off and wasn't too thrilled that he was subbed off. But, the one thing that concerns me from a Barcelona's perspective is just how they are using and how João Cancelo is played. I don't want to get too tactical on it because I know we got a couple more things we want to touch on before the end of the episode, but it's just a weird way that he plays, even though he's supposed to be a back. He never sits in the back, and is kind of a liability on the defensive side for Barcelona, given how tight and compact they were last year. But we'll see what happens as they go forward. It was nice to see them, though, play a little bit better.
Absolutely. And to kind of pivot over to the Italian league, another race that seems to run its course, unfortunately.
Oh, this is over. This is over.
Okay, so we can confirm that the Inter's definitely done. 9-point lead now. Lautaro Brace.
With a game in hand, by the way.
With a game in hand, which makes it even sadder for Serie A, other teams around who are trying to compete with them. But I do want to phrase a question to you. Is Lautaro Martinez the most informed striker in the world right now?
He's definitely up there. I mean, another Brace.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. There we go. Okay. You continue. I just wanted to make sure I didn't want you to jump around a little bit.
No, I mean, it's tough, though, because it is Serie A, right? And I think that's part of the perception. It's not Erling Haaland doing it in the Premier League. And he's at 17 goals and having missed a boatload of games. But Lautaro Martinez is putting the ball in the net. And if you're a striker, it doesn't matter what league you're in, you put the ball in the net, that's your job. And you know how to do that regardless of where you're playing. So if you drop him in to Premier League, he probably doesn't score as many as he has, but he still scores a bunch. Now, it will be important for them to get him on the score sheet against Atletico Madrid. That is a huge, huge plus. If they get that, they need it. And so he didn't play the other day, to my awareness or remembrance.
He did.
But he didn't.
He created the goal. It was deflection that had Arnautovic.
Okay, fair enough. But he needs to score versus around Arnautovic. Like that if they want to go far in this tournament, he needs to score in the Champions League. And that's where, again, it's in the Serie A, he's doing it left and right, but he's got to prove himself to the rest of the world. But to me, I go by goals, and he has some of the highest number of goals this season across Europe.
I agree with that point. Now, you did try to caveat it by saying he's in the Serie A. I do want to just put it out there that they're more than likely going to get the extra UCL spot for this next year. And why is that? That is because there's more Italian teams than any other nationality in the UCL competition right now. That is not a coincidence. Not a coincidence. So I do agree. Obviously, the Premier League and La Liga, and you could maybe argue Bundesliga, has maybe a better quality top to bottom. But I do think this Inter side, paired with Lautaro Martinez, are a top 3 side in the world, if not numero uno or dos. And I don't know why I said Spanish and not Italian, but
I was going to say, I didn't want to call you out on that though.
Yeah, that didn't sound right. But I'm going to also, mention that Juve, who are trying to catch them, were able to just, get 3 points here with a 3-2 thriller against Frosinone. Rugani, with a 94th minute winner. Dusan Vlahovic, getting the ball from McKinney twice, scores a brace, continues his fiery form. And I'm loving that duo between McKinney and Vlahovic. Unfortunately, McKinney did get injured, though, so we don't know the extent of that injury.
Looks like a dislocated shoulder from what our first report. So it could be
Ouch.
A couple weeks. Yeah, ouch is right. Good thing they're not in the race anyway, so it doesn't really matter. AC Milan also drops points against Atalanta. So, a little bit of separation there again for Juve as they get 3 points. We've talked about that race, kind of where that could net out. So it looks like it's not over yet. That definitely has still a little bit of legs left as far as, AC Milan catching Juventus, but especially with Weston McKennie out, that would be a big blow for Juventus and potentially drop into third. Atalanta, though, pick up a big point to stay right behind Bologna. Roma probably are the last team within this race now. Daniel, we touched on how fun this race has been for that fourth spot in Champions League. It looks like it's starting to separate itself out a little bit, though. Lazio feel to have dropped off now at 40 points, 8 points back and forth. Fiorentina 38 points, and Napoli, who absolutely just continue to play poorly. Caligari dropping and drawing against Cagliari, not good. And so we're looking at basically Bologna, Atalanta, and Roma in my mind for fourth. And so it's going to be an interesting one. It's been fun to watch. It still will be because all three teams are very close. And you've seen what Rossi has done with Roma. So they're on the up and up, if you will, or trending up. So can they make a little bit of a run and catch Bologna? That'll be kind of what leaves me watching Serie A at this point for the rest of the season.
You know what else will have you watching Serie A by the end of the season is this relegation scrap that they have. Now, Calgary, they do get a much needed point here against Napoli, but 13th to 19th are only separated by 5 points. That is a lot of teams in that little sub area, including Hellas Verona's Karol Swiderski, Charlotte FC player on loan. So it's going to be really interesting to see what team catches form and which team slump. In this relegation zone, there's only one team that's for sure probably going to get relegated, but Calgary, Hellas Verona, just to name a few, are going to be the teams that are currently in there, but they're going to be trying to fight with the teams outside to survive relegation here. So definitely keep an eye on that.
I was hoping you're going to try it. I'm not even going to try it. I was hoping you were going to go for the
Calgary.
The last place team. I
is it Solitana? Is it that one?
Close enough. Close enough.
Close. Salernitana.
Yep. Nah, you're just going to bury it. You should have just stuck with it the way you were.
Don't think about it. You can't think about it. Exactly. But all right. Well, I know you're not looking forward to this, but let's just go ahead and get this underway. Just give me a second real quick. I'm going to just queue up something and then we can go. I'm just going to actually, no, I don't have it. I was going to queue We Are the Champions here. Did you watch Psych? You ever watch Psych, the show?
I did watch Psych.
I'm going to give you a nice suck it because you are a loser for the second time this season. You know, I beat you with NCFC and Charlotte Independence, and I had to come around again with Liverpool against Chelsea. I've been looking forward to this all day. Suck it. But it was a good game. I will give you that. And I know we're going to really go into, how Pochettino, how you're going to set up the teams and everything. But I just want to lay out a few stats before we get started. And I don't think you're going to like this first one I'm going to read off here. So let me prepare that real fast. All right. So Chelsea are the first side in English football history to lose 6 consecutive domestic cup finals. 2019 FA Cup or
EFL
Cup.
You don't have to read them out. I know what
2020, 2021, 2022, 2022, and 2024.
Right.
The blue job, calling the blue £1 billion bottle jobs. That's not a fun name. Not a fun name. But, this was probably your final to lose. I'm going to just go out there and say it.
Our final to lose. It didn't feel that way going into the match. Certainly, of course, you guys in the form that you're in, top the table, us where we are. I will say by 80th minute, I would agree with you. I think at the end of the match, we had the momentum going into the final whistle. Definitely were the better team and put the foot down. Back and forth match, really good watch as a neutral. I'm not going to sit here and say anything negative about the team. I text you good game afterwards, knowing I was going to get berated by some bullshit after, but that's okay. But going into it, I think we had a chance to really, kind of close it out. You had a lot of youngsters at the end there, given, just like we've talked about earlier in the show, just the health of the squad and who was on the bench and a long game, a tough game, a lot of running. Tactically, you guys dominated the midfield early on. Endo was really winning balls against Enzo and kind of putting that pressure on us, really winning that ball high up in the pitch and putting it back into the box, really. But you didn't really do much with it. And then Chelsea kind of found their legs a little bit later in the second half, a little bit towards the end of the first half as well. I would say they played a little better. And then really the second half was a much better Chelsea. I do think a little bit of it was nerves too for a young squad on our side for the first 20 minutes. It's still a young squad. Raheem Sterling was the oldest player on the pitch at 29 for Chelsea. So, that's something that you're looking at. Again, I don't diminish that we spent $1 billion on those players that are young. but it's still a young squad. And obviously, given that you brought in younger players, playing 3 teenagers at the end of the match, you can't really say anything differently towards you guys. But it was a good match, and you lean on the captain, and he delivers an absolute beauty of a goal, 119th minute. Demoralizing. Like I said, I sat and stared at my television for 10 minutes. But to be honest, I would have actually preferred to lose the way we did than penalties. Penalties is honestly my least favorite way to go out. So I was hoping that there would have been a regulation or extra time goal. Of course, I wished it was Chelsea, but it didn't happen. And, we'll see what happens in the FA Cup at this point. That's all we have left to play for this season. So, but I like what I saw from our side, and we are improving continuously. And you heard Pochettino talk after the game. It's still a project. These guys are going through it for the first time. We're going to lose together. They're going to grow, and we're going to reassess what the project looks like. And so, yeah, I mean, this is just another stepping stone in a team that's building. And it was a tough loss, but sometimes you have to have tough losses to grow and develop as a side. So we'll see what happens the rest of the way. Now is from here, the rest of the way is kind of what Chelsea will be going forward, I think. And
how
that's
you react.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just going to kind of go into just a few things that I thought were pretty interesting in this match. Liverpool, 13 senior players, and the rest were the academy kids. So the fact that we were not only able to keep it close throughout the game, but then bring on 4 kids from the academy, or not, if not, 4, is pretty incredible. And they literally just plugged and played and fought hard for the 3 points, or I guess for the trophy, excuse me. But all I have to say is Danke, Jurgen. You're truly a class above. I don't care about La Masia. All I care about is La Axa, because we just keep pumping out these kids and they keep performing on a weekly basis. Connor Bradley started the match. Kwanzaa came in, McConnell, Dons, and Bobby Clark. So shout out to all you kids. Enjoy the day. I also want to give a shout out to Kelleher. Man, was he immense. You guys probably had the better chances, but he completely kept us in the game. Not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. And I really think when I said this was your game to lose, I wouldn't have said that a week ago. When I saw the lineup and who was missing, I slightly favored you guys in my head. But then when it came to the match, I just feel like one team was clinical and one team wasn't. And the team that was ended up coming out with the trophy, which is definitely unfortunate. Each team had a goal called off and a ball off the woodwork. So fairly even in that respect. It just, when we brought on academy kids, you brought on Nkunku and Mudryk and Madueke. So really, there's just not a better coach in the world, in my opinion, than Jurgen. And he's going to really enjoy this trophy and, continue that farewell tour.
Yeah, I will say, we had our chances. If it was anyone else other than Chelsea, you guys probably lose. But it's Chelsea and we don't know how to put the ball in the net. So,
Yep.
There you go. And, but yeah, again, all credit to the team and what you guys have done over there. And, of course, quadruple still on the table, as well. And would be great for Jurgen to go out that way. So, we'll see what happens. But Daniel, we've covered a lot here. Just want to cover quickly on a couple of rest of the world games. And then we have our predictions to wrap us up. PSG draw against Rouen. But Rennes is not that great. And so PSG still has a pretty good cushion atop the table. Just of course we're keeping an eye out just because it's PSG and they're one of the best teams in the world. However you look at the league, that's up to you. But 11 points now, clear at the top. Feels like this is pretty much done and dusted. Brest, very good story in second place, but Monaco right behind them now with 2 points behind. So you do expect at some point that Ligue 1 will be the top 2 teams that it usually is, PSG and Monaco going forward.
I learned something new, by the way, in this Monaco match.
Yeah, go ahead.
Don't even get Balogun close to a penalty spot. I think he's missed now 5 penalties on the year, something insane like that.
It's been bad.
When it comes to Copa America, especially, Pulisic is always going to take it, but we're talking penalty shootouts. Greg, you now know don't even think about putting Florian up there
You
because
just got me upset even more. You just got me upset that
I
you
know,
mentioned
I know.
Greg. So thanks
I
for that.
know.
Appreciate
Well,
it.
yeah, you also lost today, so just to mention that as well. But yeah, I just thought I wanted to throw that in real quick. Before, I didn't mean to interrupt you though.
Oh no, you're good. And the
and
other one
then
was AZ Akmar beating Ajax today as well. So Akmar basically now is locked down third position. It seems like with Ajax continuing to just kind of falter here, fourth position. Excuse me. Ajax now 6 points back for fourth. Given how the year started, pretty remarkable that they're even this close in contention. But going to be a disappointing year in Amsterdam for Ajax. Benfica catches up to Lisbon, who do drop points in the Portuguese league. So that's going to be a tight race to the finish there. Benfica is currently still atop the table there. Sporting in second place as well.
one
So,
game in hand though. That's why they're 2
exactly.
points. So we'll see how that goes.
We'll see where that goes. But again, we covered a lot. There's still games on Monday, which we alluded to a little bit, and then also there are some games on Tuesday with Copa del Rey. And so Daniel and I wanted to touch on some predictions for you guys. Usually we save those for Thursday, which we will still have some of those on Thursday's show as well. But Daniel, take us through some of these games that I get to give you my nap game, and let's work. So no nap during work.
Yeah, you would hate to tell your employer that.
It's all Daniel's fault. He picked the nap game.
To go ahead and start, Girona versus Rayo. We've mentioned it a couple times now. Who do you have winning that match?
I'll take a draw here. Nothing against Girona. Just Rayo's a solid squad. And I do think you're going to see Girona drop some points. And this one, I'll take a 1-1 draw.
1-1 draw. All right. I'm going to go 2-1 Girona win to get back on track. Fiorentina versus Lazio.
Was a fun matchup earlier on. They're still pretty close in the table. This is probably the nap game of the week, regardless what the weekend is like.
That is true.
This is probably 0-0. I will take a 0-0 gladly here.
I'm going to go 1-1, but just as boring as a 0-0. Real Sociedad versus Mallorca, semifinal second leg, 0-0 aggregate so far. Who do you have?
This was a fun matchup in the league as well. If you watched this game the other day, so these two have been really contested and testy the last couple of legs here, both in Copa del Rey and La Ligue. I think Real Sociedad though has more firepower. Give me them in a 2-0 result.
Yeah, they've been struggling as of late, so I'm going to go 1-1 after extra time or for the 90, and then Real Sociedad either get through with extra time or penalties. And then Inter plays Atalanta.
3-0 Inter. Atalanta's good,
Wow.
but I think Inter they're on a mission. I don't think there's really anyone stopping them this year.
I'm going to go 2-1 Inter. I think it'll be a closer game than you're giving credit for, but I do think Inter keeps it rolling, and I just don't know if they're going to lose the rest of the year in the league. Athletic Club versus Atletico Madrid, the two Atleticos that we love to mess up pretty frequently, are in the second leg of their semifinal in the Copa del Rey. Athletic Club is up 1-0 on aggregate. Is there going to be goals? Who do you have advancing, and then what do you have the score of the game?
This being at Club, I'll take Club. Atletico Madrid plays so differently on the road. They did have a draw yesterday against Almeria, which I think was a look ahead to this game, to be honest. But again, I do think that they play entirely different on the road. Give me 1-0 Athletic Club, and they advance 2-0 on aggregate. It could also be a 0-0 draw, and they would advance. I think they would be completely content with that too. But either way, Club advance. I do think they also win the game, though.
Club or Bilbao, whatever the listeners prefer here, but I'm going to go with Bilbao advancing as well, especially with no Griezmann currently. I think that's a big miss. And Nico Williams did get a red card in the league that we failed to mention in the roundup, but he will be, wanting to redeem himself in this match. So I think the Williams brothers go off to, probably a 2-1 win here, and they walk their way to the semifinals. Probably, I'm going to guess a Athletic Bilbao or Athletic Club matchup versus Real Sociedad, which will be a really interesting Copa del Rey, as well as the fight for fourth place that we originally had at the start of the season, Matt. So it all comes full circle for us. Now, thank you. If you're still tuning in, thank you for listening to another full-time roundup episode. Just real quick housekeeping. Please like the podcast. Please subscribe on YouTube. We got some new content coming out for you very soon. Please rate the podcast 5 stars on any platform you listen to, and go ahead and download so we can get some good analytics on, what we're doing here, because we do it for you guys. And then, of course, last but not least, follow the Twitter at Fulltime Roundup. Interact with us. If you want to make fun of Matt for being a loser in the EFL final, you can tweet at him at Life of Gesslen.
There's more Chelsea fans than Liverpool fans. Just going to point that out. So.
For sure. But you can also, wish me congratulations at Liverpool CLTFC. So thank you again, guys, for listening here, and have a wonderful rest of the week.